Welcome to the Civil Rights Sports Telecast. I'm your host with the most from the bottom of the East Coast, Andrew Green. Coming live from the beautiful city of Atlanta, Georgia, we have a special episode honoring athletes that persevered and became legends at a time where they were nearly invisible. I mean, good enough to even end up in some of your favorite rap songs. Lyrics like, I jack, I rob, I sin, except for when I run bass, I dodge the pen. Shout out to Hove. Even a bass guard with the honorable mention of Crst Yamaguchi. And the RZA of the Wu-Tang Clan, even saying, talk strange like Bjork, great hero Jim Thorpe. Just some of the athletes that we'll be talking about today. At a time where all the activists and political leaders were the ones that people sought their advice from, sought who to follow, these athletes became something, a model of sorts, to follow for the people of their race, of their story, of their creed. A true leader. Born in 1919 in Cairo, Georgia, our first athlete and his four siblings were part of 6 million people that made the Great Migration to the West Coast. That'd be Jackie Robinson. As soon as he got out there, sports became his thing, becoming a 4-star athlete as well as a 4-letter athlete in college, competing in track and field, baseball, football, as well as basketball. Yeah, that's right. The TV, the computer, the screen is up all the way. I said 4 sports, but like me and you, probably know him for baseball. And at the time, even according to Rick Swain for Society for American Baseball Research, baseball was considered Jackie's worst sport. He was great in everything, but at the time, baseball just wasn't his best. With the well-decorated college career under his belt, Jackie fell fate to the lifestyle of many young Americans, including African-American males in the early 1940s, and was drafted into the U.S. military. And with the presence of systematic racism, nothing in the military changed for young Jackie. As a young African-American male, he still experienced episodes of prejudice, racism, even while applying for his candidacy for officer while serving in the military. His application process was prolonged, just as was several many other African-American males, as an effort to keep them out of serving for the same military that called him away. But an unlikely champ and boxing champ, heavyweight champ, Joe Louis stepped in and spoke on young Jackie's behalf. He volunteered his efforts to make sure that Jackie and many young African-American males see the day that the country that called them away from home denied them the services or even the same benefits. But all the while in the military, Jackie managed to serve while on American soil, and even in his 4 years was promoted to second lieutenant. In 1945, after an honorable discharge, a brief stint with the Kansas City Monarchs in 1945, followed by the Royals in 46, Jackie makes his major league debut donning the blue, the white, for the Brooklyn Dodgers, 1947. Now, an interesting time where players on the team even started a petition where they felt like they shouldn't play on the same team as him. Now, while Jackie was not the best talented, nor was he most revered Negro athlete at the time, but he did fit a certain mold and a certain look that they wanted for him. He played for the Dodgers until 1956. He helped the team win a championship in 1955. Now, while his final numbers, some may debate, weren't Hall of Fame level, his impact and what he meant for the game, what he overcame, and what he became was more important than many other players could amount to in any number, ERA, or bases stolen. Jackie was nominated to the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1962, breaking another major barrier, being the first African American to receive such honor. And opposed Jackie Robinson just as important as plain days Jackie Robinson. After his retirement, he aligned himself with civil rights activists such as Martin Luther King to further the civil rights efforts and to let his struggle, the people's struggle, the people that he represents and that who he played through, let their story be heard on a national level, using his stardom, using his platform, not to just sell jerseys, trading cards, if you will, but to sell a story, a true story. In the late 1960s, Jackie started a construction company with the belief that we can have better schools, but what's the point if children don't have a decent home to come home to? So in the long run, he felt that a decent home would provide them an opportunity to avoid the perils of the streets. In his efforts to help decent homes become a priority in the black community in Harlem, he co-founded the National Freedom Bank to help people obtain decent mortgages so that they'll be able to afford better homes. On June 4th, 1972, the Dodgers retired his number 42, the first of his honor also for the organization. Jackie later died in October of a heart attack. It was believed that he was a diabetic but never spoke publicly about it. Now, while he died in 1972, his efforts to continue to help the community never stopped. Following his death in 1972, his wife Rachel decided to start the Jackie Robinson Foundation in 1973. The efforts of the Jackie Robinson Foundation awards students who are selected a scholarship of up to $5,000 for a maximum of 4 years of higher education. A spectacular award, not the most distinguishable and outstanding award, in my opinion, that Jackie Robinson received in his lifetime, came in 1997 when his number 42 was retired throughout the Major League Baseball. Now, if you don't understand what that means, I mean no one in the future, 2030, 2040, 2050 will ever be able to don the number of 42, no matter what the organization. Just a slight thank you for some of the efforts that he put forth, for not only for the Major League Baseball, but for black Americans everywhere in the workforce, fighting to be leaders, fighting to be bosses, and fighting to be legends. And I want to give a special shout out to Roger Kahn and his amazing article on the Jackie Robinson That I Remember in PBS for the Jackie Robinson documentary, as well as the timeline for the information they provided. And our second athlete on the list plays in an arena just a tad bit colder, body just a little bit slender, and skin just a little bit lighter. But nonetheless, the rights of Asian Americans and their fight for equality in America, nonetheless, the same as every other race. Born July 12, 1971, in Hayward, California, Christine Suya Yamaguchi was born how we now receive as not someone that was handicapped, but someone living with a disability. She was born with club feet and had to wear casts to correct them. She didn't start skating until the age of 6, along with her older sister, Lori. Her path to greatness began in 1986 when her and partner Rudy Galanito won the junior pairs at the U.S. Championships, an honor that she later received in 1989 as well as 90. And in 1992, everything coming to fruition as she won gold at the 1992 Winter Olympics. After her Olympic gold victory in 1992, Crst Yamaguchi went on the tour with Stars on Ice from 1992 until 2002. In 1998, she was inducted into the U.S. Ice Skating Hall of Fame, and in 1999, later inducted into the World Ice Skating Hall of Fame. In 1996, the year I was born, she started a nonprofit organization for the aid of underprivileged children. She also became an author in 1997. Yamaguchi wrote Figure Skating for Dummies, and along with her manual to basically try to be like her, if best. She also wrote 3 novels, one being her autobiography, Always Dream, a story for preteens that displays and depicts how she made it and her journey to who she became today. Special thanks to the docuseries Faces of America and Crst Yamaguchi's own Always Dream for the information provided for this section. Now, if you're a college football fanatic, the next name that comes up, you probably heard it before or you know a little bit about. But Jim Thorpe, like many Native Americans, erased, never even heard of. Born May 28, 1887, near modern-day Prague, Oklahoma, Jim Thorpe was born to the esteemed bloodline of Sac and Fox tribe. Now, like many other Native American tribes, they were forced to relocate, kind of restart almost, in a land that used to be theirs, now was taken over by European colonists and even more members of the Gold Rush. By 1912, he was nominated for the U.S. Olympic Games in Sweden. He came in first and won gold in the heptathlon, and came in first with over 8,400 points in the decathlon. Later, he was stripped of both medals as it was found that he was paid to play amateur minor league baseball in 1909 and 1910, a direct violation of the Olympics guidelines at the time. athletic career continued as he signed a major league deal with the New York Baseball Giants. Now, while the career batting average of only a .252, safe to say Jim Thorpe wasn't the biggest slugger of all time, perhaps, but his impact out the park. Being a Native American alone in a league that barely even squeezed in African Americans, let alone any minorities, was a feat. Jim Thorpe's efforts in another arena shined as he played a premier role in the beginnings of the National Football League. Jim Thorpe played and coached in the 20s on an all-Native American team called the Orang Indians. And another hat that Jim Thorpe wore was actor. From the 30s to mid-50s, Jim Thorpe was credited with playing over 60 roles. Now at the time, you can imagine, what role would Jim Thorpe be playing? Track star? Nah. Baseball star? Not even close. Football coach or player? Not even. More than likely, every time it was a stereotypical Indian. In his efforts to continue to push the fight for equality for Native Americans in Hollywood, Jim Thorpe started a casting company to make sure that genuine Native Americans were casted in major Hollywood films. On March 28, 1953, Jim Thorpe suffered a heart attack. But before he could leave this earth, his memory and his legacy was honored as the Associated Press nominated him the greatest athlete of the first half of the 20th century in 1950. And as well as being nominated as the greatest athlete of the first half of the 20th century, Jim Thorpe was also named a charter member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 1963 and the National Football Hall of Fame in 1982. Also having his records and gold medals restored for the 1912 Sweden Olympics. Thank you to Sports Century and ESPN for the documentary on Jim Thorpe, as well as 8 Native American athletes you should know by Indian Country today.
As you're taking the time to commemorate and look back on these athletes' accomplishments in their respective sports, it is truly important to remember that it is not what they did on the field, on the track, or on the rink that made them important, but the impact and some of the underlying similarities that they had. Also, some of the glaring differences that each civil rights movement held. Among the Asian American and Native American civil rights movement, the lack of representation for women is immense, virtually impossible to find when doing any research for the project. The feminist theory would suggest that living in a patriarchal society, being identified as the civil rights movement that spearheaded the movements to follow the African American civil rights movement, did a precise job, if not perfect, but a precise and accurate job of depicting women of the struggle, just as they did men, providing a special framing that was at the emotions and the feelings, and yield empathy for those who knew nothing of the struggle, but only could see the suffering of a vulnerable woman or a vulnerable child. The model citizen and social stratification, the parallel between African Americans and Asian Americans, seems to be one that even to this day riddles our country. Asian Americans have been used as a model minority of sorts, socially constructed by the powers of white supremacy to pit minorities against minorities. If they feel as if one group can essentially pull themselves up by their own bootstraps, why can't you? Why is it that Asian Americans tend to be associated with, seem to be more affiliated and closely related to a Eurocentric style of living in America due to their monetary success through educational endeavors and an emphasis on buying and owning property as well as taking care of your family? A key difference that is always left out when comparing minorities, which is such a silly idea, comparing struggles, comparing who is oppressed. Well, a key difference that's always left out is the means by which people enter the country. Japanese Americans, Vietnamese Americans, Chinese Americans, several groups of Asian American descent come to the country with a subscribed status and a background and a business plan already executed, unlike African Americans who were brought to this country as slaves